Bonsoir, my darlings. Well, don't just stand there. Enter my humble abode. Do you like my new doorbell? I got it for a steal at a garage sale the other week. Isn't it just adorable? So, what's new with you? Do help yourself to blood jam cake. There's plenty there. Good, rich human blood, fresh from the corpse. That was a gift from a dearly departed friend. She told me, Debbie, when I die, you have my full permission to donate my blood in any way you wish. Such a kind soul. And now look at all the people she's helping. All of you, filling your fat faces on my juicy jam cakes. What an angel she was. What's that, dear? Oh, my painting. You like it, do you? Yes, well, they call it The Crying Boy. I just love to see children crying. And now I can, all day long. Oh, that reminds me. This first story actually features this painting. In fact, it inspired me to buy it. You'll soon see why. The first house I ever lived in was located in West County, Dublin, 17 Lindisfarne Green. My parents moved there in the late 1970s, and then I was born, along with my younger brother and younger sister. The area itself was your typical council estate. It was a semi-detached house with 3 bedrooms. Growing up there was okay, just. It was part of my childhood where I was bullied quite a bit, which made me quite withdrawn, so I retreated to the confines of my room for the most part. It was there that I wrote poetry, lyrics, and started drawing as a way to express myself. The house was your usual family council estate house of that time. 3 bedrooms, kitchen diner, small bathroom. Lots of mysterious things happened in this house while we were living there. Kettles would mysteriously switch on and off. We would frequently hear heavy footsteps on the stairs, and always between the hours of midnight and 1:30 a.m. Our heavy-footed ghost we liked to call Ralph. Some days we'd be sitting downstairs and hear footsteps like children running and doors slamming and lights flickering. One evening, when I was about 8, I remember being awake for much of the night as there was a raging thunderstorm. It was Good Friday, so around Easter time. I tossed and turned but just couldn't get to sleep, so I sat up in bed somewhere around dawn when I noticed in the corner of my eye some sort of mist forming in the corner of the bedroom. Within seconds, a ghostly figure of what can only be described as a Victorian maid carrying a tray with 2 cups and a teapot sailed through the room. She didn't look at me. She just floated right past me and through the wall behind my bed. She was dressed in a large black long dress with a white apron and a white shower cap-like bonnet on her head. The even stranger thing is, I felt completely calm. The one abiding memory I have, apart from seeing her, was that I felt so at peace. I wasn't frightened and I didn't cry. Down in the kitchen, we had a painting called The Crying Boy hanging in the kitchen diner. It was a little boy's face with red hair and freckles, and tears are visibly seen falling from his big crystal blue eyes and running down his cheeks. I was always unnerved by it hanging there, as it always seemed to be watching me bizarrely. One afternoon, we had a chip pan on for lunch, and for some reason it was left unattended. I think we were all playing outside as it was a hot summer's day. 30 or so minutes later, we heard a loud beeping going off coming from inside the house. It was the smoke alarm. We realised that the kitchen itself was on fire. Flames engulfed the room and smoke billowed from the windows. After calling the emergency services, the fire was finally put out, but the damage had been done. The whole kitchen diner was badly burnt. Blackened walls and units, all burnt. But that wasn't all. We couldn't believe our eyes when looking around the remains of our kitchen that the only thing left untouched and unmarked was the painting. Not a single scratch on it, nothing. It was like it hadn't even been in the room. Needless to say, we hung it back up after we had the room redecorated, not knowing about its past. When we left the house eventually, a day or two before we were due to go, we were packing up the last bits and pieces in the house. The last thing to go was the crying boy. When we got up in the morning, we were due to leave shortly before midday. The wall where the picture hung started weeping from the ceiling, and nowhere else. The picture, once again, was left untouched. There was no leaks to be found, and we had no water running in the house whatsoever. Our parents decided enough was enough, and the painting was disposed of. It was only a few years later when I saw an article in the newspaper about the Crying Boy painting. It read, "The Crying Boy is a mass-produced print of a painting by Italian painter Giovanni Brajolin. It was widely distributed from the 1950s onwards. On the 5th of September 1985, the British tabloid newspaper The Sun has reported that the Essex firefighter claimed the undamaged copies of the painting were frequently found amidst the ruins of burnt houses. There was a fire in a house that destroyed everything except the Crying Boy painting in 1985. And then in 1988, there was another fire in the house of the new owner. Again, the only object that survived the fire was the painting. Our next home was 27 Melrose Park. We thought by leaving our previous house that we'd have some peace at last. No, definitely not. Again, strange goings-on began shortly after moving in. Lights flickering, taps being turned on. Whoever occupied this house seemed to gravitate towards me and was not very friendly. One big memory I have is when I was 3 or so steps from the top of the stairs. I felt an icy cold hand on my back. Something growled in my ear, "Leave," and pushed me down the stairs. I managed to catch my balance a step before the bottom and twisted my wrist in an effort to hold on. The room where I slept was always cold, even with the heating on. One night, when he was sleeping, my brother's duvet was ripped off him by some unseen force. It really frightened him. Another strange occurrence was when both my parents were out, and I was sitting on the living room floor reading a magazine. I think it was Smash Hits, as I was a massive collector. Loved that magazine. It was night time and I heard a knock at the window. I thought they'd forgotten their keys. I jumped up to answer the door, but there was no one there. About 10 minutes later, the same thing happened, and once again I went to check, and nothing. And then the phone rang. I picked it up, but all I could hear was static. This was around 9:20 p.m. at night, so I was getting fairly scared at this point. About 10 p.m, my parents drove up to the house, and I remember thinking that they were home very early. Turns out they returned after hearing some devastating news about my grandfather's passing. The exact time that he had passed away turned out to be 9:20 p.m. Was he trying to let me know that he was on his way out of this world and gave a knock as he was passing? It's hard to know, but the coincidence never fails to make my blood run cold. Another weird and frankly striking coincidence was that regrettably my father had a severe work accident one day when a 2-ton gate fell on him. His injuries put him in a coma for a month, and he had to learn to speak and chew and walk again. It was awful. He had a wristwatch with a time face and a section next to it with the word day and then the date. The nurse handed the belongings to my mother a few days later, as they had to remove all jewellery and clothing to save him. When my mother took the watch out of the clear plastic bag, it was unscathed. Apart from where it should have said day, it said die. And the date of the accident. The watch was still ticking, but the word die, spelt D-I-E, and the date of the accident were on the watch. I'll never forget the noise my mother let out as soon as she saw it. My brother showed me the watch. I couldn't believe it. Oak Way. We moved there when I was 19. It was the biggest of the houses we had lived and had a large winding staircase. Things seemed to be calmer here, except for one abiding memory I have on Christmas Day, just before we were all to sit down to dinner. We were all seated, waiting for my brother to join us. He was somewhere in the house. Between the dining area and living room, there was a frosted glass door. I got up from my seat to go and find my brother, and noticed that behind the frosted door to the living room, there was a shadow. I banged on the door to tell my brother that his dinner was getting cold and to hurry up because we were waiting for him, only to see him coming round the corner from the laundry room in the complete opposite direction. Who was that? Everyone else was seated around the table, and there was no one left to sit there except my brother. My home now is Beach Row Cottages, a bungalow about 200 years old, give or take, and sits in an old monastic village here in Dublin. Again, like all the other properties I've lived in, there are lots and lots of strange happenings in this house. Our dog stares at the wall most nights and growls. She follows something around, but nothing is there. We've had her little pink ball she loves to play with roll from the kitchen into the living room when no one is there. On odd occasions, we awake to the smell of cooking in the kitchen, even when no one was there, and this would be around 6 a.m. in the morning. It's not every day, but a few times over the years that we've been there. I've heard my name being called several times, usually in the early hours of the morning, as recent as last Wednesday, when something banged on my bedroom door and shouted my name. It was a woman, I could tell, but it was a lower frequency and sounded almost like radio static. I've also been hit while I was asleep, not badly, but enough to know that there was something in my room. One was the sensation of both forearms straight down on my thighs while I was lying on my back, and another was a punch to my behind as I was laying on my stomach. I froze. I didn't move. I just hoped it would go away. During the night, when I have to go to the bathroom, the overwhelming sense of dread is ridiculous. I'm not sure what causes it, but it's almost like my subconscious is trying to tell me something. I usually run back to my room. Not that I'm that much safer there, judging by what I've experienced so far. I've never invented this, or them at all. Whatever the experiences are, I wish they would go away, completely. The feelings are not nice, and whilst it's not every day that it happens, the fact that it has it all is just a no from me. My mother has told me that she too was woken up in the current family home the other week by someone yelling Annie. Her name is Annie. So we can't both be hearing things, though my experiences are much more frequent, regrettably. Most of the experiences happen during the night or just as day breaks. It'll always be disconcerting. As said, it's not every day that it happens, but you won't catch me watching Paranormal Activity, that's for sure.
Well, there you have it. And of course, I now own that very painting of the crying boy. And the great thing is, I know if there's ever a fire, the painting will survive. Win-win.
When I was 12, me and 3 of my friends, let's call them Cara, Maya and Anna, were having a sleepover in Anna's garden. We had a really fun night, the usual sleepover stuff. Movies, popcorn, pizza, just having fun. Eventually, we went out into the back garden where we'd set up a tent to sleep in. It was around 2 in the morning, and my friends were already asleep. I always have problems with falling asleep, so I was still awake. I decided to listen to my music, and I got a little scared for a second because the theme of Halloween started playing. I changed the song and shortly after took off my headphones because I thought I heard someone walking around our tent. It was silent for a while until I heard something that sounded like a scratching noise coming from outside the tent. I was a little paranoid, so I woke up my friends. We all held our breath and listened for a while, and soon it stopped. Silence. We sat waiting, wondering if it would start up again, but then we heard something else. Footsteps, crunching over the grass, walking around our tent. The steps were just circling the tent, going around and around. There were no shadows or outlines of anyone, just the sound of these footsteps. Cara started to get really scared. She was breathing heavily. I wanted to stay calm, but it was hard not to panic. I called out, "Who's there?" But no answer. Then I thought maybe it was Anna's cousin and his girlfriend back from the party they went on and probably wanted to terrorize us. Without really thinking, I just said out loud, "Go away, we're trying to sleep." It went silent for a few minutes, until it sounded like someone was throwing water balloons at our tent. I told my friends that it's probably just Anna's cousin trying to scare us. So we all started calling out, saying he should leave, and we're not scared and that he's annoying us. No response, and it carried on. One by one, these things hitting the walls of our tent. I suggested to the others that we should go outside and see if it's him. My friends didn't want to go first, so it was down to me. I got my phone, turned on the flashlight, and started to slowly unzip the tent. I couldn't see anything, just pitch dark. I stepped out of the tent, looking around with my friends on my tail. We didn't see anything. There was nothing there. We were also looking for popped balloon parts on the grass, but there was none, and the floor wasn't wet at all. All 3 of us had heard it. There was no way we'd imagined it, and yet we seemed to be alone. Mia suggested that we should go back into the house and sleep there instead. So we did. There was no way we were staying in the tent after that. It was only the next week at school that we heard the rumour about the 3 guys from Poland walking around my village, kidnapping kids and selling their organs. Needless to say, we never had a tent sleepover again.
What about that slumber party? I'm not one for camping in nature. All that outdoorsy stuff wreaks havoc with my hair. Still, looks like those young girls had a lucky escape. What's in my filing cabinet next? Ah, found it. Now, here's another question for you, kiddies. Do you believe in angels? Well, our next story is one I think you will like.
Scott McClure, the Angel. I grew up in a Christian home and always questioned the supernatural or whether or not angels or God existed. I wasn't necessarily a skeptic, but I definitely didn't fully know how I felt about religion or God. At the time of the incident, I was in my early 20s and I was working a third shift job in Owensboro, Kentucky. It was a place called DBM Technology. We made car and van parts, like filters. I was living in Bremen, Kentucky at the time, which was about a 45-minute drive to work. I was driving home from my third shift job around 7 to 8 a.m. in the morning. I usually like to jam to some music and keep the window rolled down to let some fresh air in and help me stay awake. But I was very sleepy this particular day, considering I wasn't getting enough rest during this period of my life. My eyelids were heavy, and I was struggling to keep them open. I turned up the music on the stereo in effort to keep myself awake. I should have just pulled over, but I was stubborn, and I wanted to just get home. So I kept going. I remember driving through the small town called Island. It was this place in between work and home where, on both sides of the road, there was a drop-off, like a viaduct. At the time, there were no railings, so it was pretty scary to drive through there. At about 3/4 of the way home, my eyelids closed, and this time, they didn't open. I fell asleep. I don't remember anything, just blackness. I was out, completely unconscious. But then suddenly, I awoke with a start. I felt these hands on both of my shoulders. At first it was a light touch, but then the grip became tighter. I could feel each finger digging into my shoulders. The hands then shook me vigorously. While feeling this, my surroundings had this kind of golden glow, like sunlight was peeking through from behind me. It was beautiful, actually, and really surreal, but it only lasted a few seconds. I was awake, and thankfully still perfectly on the road, on my side of the lines. I was shocked to find that I didn't drive off into the drop-off of the viaduct. It was a miracle, because I was at least a half a mile down the road from where I was before I dozed off. I really can't explain what happened or why it happened to me. Could it have been an angel, coincidence, or luck? It felt unreal, and I felt so thankful just to be alive. It could have ended so differently. I was counting my blessings that day. People ask me what I think it was, and I tell them I had an angel looking over me. Although I don't consider myself a very religious person, it has definitely helped me restore my faith and brought me closer to God.
I feel almost dreamlike now. What a soothing story. You know, I felt a pair of angelic hands shaking my shoulders once. Oh no, wait, that was the dentist trying to bring me round after I inhaled too much gas and air. Ah, the good old days. Until next week, stay safe. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And, oh, well, I guess you'll be having lots of fun then. See you next week, kittens. Ciao.